Thank you again for so many of you for coming here today. I will now like to introduce you to the man of the moment, to our keynote speaker, Julian Burnside. I'm sure he needs no introduction, but he's a pretty incredible individual. He's an Australian barrister. He practices principally in commercial litigation, trade practices and administrative law, but he's probably best known for his incredible work as a human rights and refugee advocate and as an author. And with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Julian.
Thank you very much. I was planning to start by saying I'm very happy to be in Sydney to launch this, but I'm not. I'm always happy to be in Sydney, but I'm not happy to be launching this book for two reasons. First, because of its title and what its title signifies, and second, because such a book is needed at all. What's wrong with the title? Oh, by the way, the empty chair? No. I was going to say, no, I wanted the chair. I was going to say that's a chair for Verity Firth. He can't be here because a year ago and 2 days he was killed in Manus Island in the detention centre, where he'd been placed as an innocent human being for processing by our government or its contractors. Anyway, why am I unhappy about the title? The Drowning Argument. The Drowning Argument is the title given to my essay, which is the first essay in the book, and I understand that my essay was the prompt for producing the book. My essay was called The Drowning Excuse. It is not an argument, it's an excuse. But I understand from the people who put the book together that internal pressure within the Labor Party forced them to change the drowning excuse to the drowning argument. And the fact that that sort of pressure was brought to bear at all, I think actually characterises the shameful stand of the Labor Party that Verity Firth Campaign. It will not surprise you that I agree entirely with Verity that the Labor Party is fatally compromised on the refugee issue. The Labor Party reintroduced offshore processing for the worst possible reasons. I don't know what went wrong with the expert panel, but there was no justification for reintroducing offshore processing and no justification for reintroducing it in a form which involves such terrible abuses of human rights. So that, for example, in Manus Island, after Reza Barati was killed on the 17th of February last year, a Supreme Court judge of the PNG Supreme Court began an own motion inquiry, which he's constitutionally entitled to do under their constitutional Bill of Rights, which we prepared for them on their independence. He began an own motion inquiry into what had been going on in Manus Island, and the government of PNG shut it down. He set up a new own motion inquiry, and they shut that down. And we did not hear a squeak of complaint from Australia on whose behalf the whole catastrophic arrangement is being carried out in Manus Island. Second, one of the major reasons that I would hold Labor equally responsible for what is going on now is because I think, and I could be wrong, but I think what is going on with the treatment of asylum seekers is inconsistent with basic Australian values. I do not believe most Australians are racist. I do not believe most Australians believe in being willfully cruel to human beings. But it's been managed and justified because from the time of Tampa, the Howard government set up the idea that these people are illegals and queue jumpers. And by the way, your chronology is slightly out. I know the Tampa chronology fairly well. The Tampa rescued the 438 asylum seekers on the 26th of August 2001. The Tampa defied Australia and steamed into the waters off Christmas Island on the 30th of August 2001. We went into court and the trial started on the Friday night, ran Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The judge adjourned to consider his decision on Wednesday the 5th of September 2001, and by a stroke of awful chronological coincidence, He delivered judgment at 2:15 in the afternoon Melbourne time on the 11th of September 2001. The next morning, you may not have noticed that we won at first instance. Barristers need to remember these things. We lost 2 days on appeal, 2 days later on appeal, but you wouldn't have noticed it because, of course, overnight the attack on America had happened and the world changed. And that's when Howard started calling boat people illegals. Because after September 11, it was not possible to say anything that might be seen as favourable to Muslims, because after September 11, the prevailing rhetoric was, there aren't just Muslims, there's only Muslim terrorists, and there aren't just boat people, there's only Muslim boat people, and they're suspected terrorists, and they're illegal, and they're queue jumpers, and so on it goes. But while it is Howard and latterly Abbott and Morrison who have persisted in that rhetoric and have gradually degraded public thinking on the subject in Australia, Labor never contradicted it. Labor has never stood up authoritatively, either in opposition or in government, and said it's a lie. They are not illegal. They do not break any law. The one thing that might change the narrative in Australia is for the Labor Party to stand in a position of authority and say the illegal thing is a lie. But they haven't done it. The other symbol, I suppose, of Labor's thoroughly compromised stand on the treatment of asylum seekers is the fact that Richard Marles is now the Shadow Minister for Immigration, and he is hopeless on the subject, absolutely hopeless. If Labor was serious about this, Melissa Park would be the Shadow. So, that's the first reason that I am not happy to be here launching this book, because the name of the book has been subverted in order to allow a little bit more room for the compromised policies that the Labor Party has had at least since 2001, probably longer. But the second reason is that the book is necessary at all. Why is it necessary to have a book that talks about the way the drownings have been exploited? The drownings excuse has gone through some interesting phases, and the way it works is roughly this. First of all, we had rhetoric from Abbott and then picked up mightily by Rudd, saying that the asylum seekers were shocking people. I think Rudd called them the scum of the earth, the lowest of the low, they should rot in hell. Forgetting, of course, that Dietrich Bonhoeffer, his moral hero, was also a people smuggler. Forgetting that Schindler was a people smuggler, and we all kind of liked him in the film and the book. Forgetting that Gustav Schroeder was a people smuggler, but he was a moral hero by any standards. Gustav Schroeder, you all know about Gustav Schroeder, the St. Louis, left Hamburg in May of 1939 with a cargo of 900 Jews seeking to escape Germany. He pulled every trick in the book. He broke every rule that was possible, trying to get them somewhere safe. He ended up trying to put them ashore at Cuba. The Cubans wouldn't have him. He was warned off at gunpoint on the Florida coast. The Americans didn't want them. He ended up going back to Europe and putting them ashore in Antwerp. A few months later, when the Low Countries were overrun, more than half of those people died in concentration camps. Gustav Schroeder was a people smuggler who tried to save 900 Jews. Then and now, he was a hero. And you may hate people smugglers, you may detest their profit motive, those who have a profit motive, but they are providing something which is needed. They are actually the path by which desperate people may be saved. Now, I don't applaud their callousness, those of them who are callous, but read Robin de Crepney's book, The People Smuggler. Ali al-Janabi sounds like a pretty decent guy. Now, allowing that there's a bit of glossing, he still sounds like a pretty decent guy, and there is no doubt that the people who have been saved from persecution by the efforts of people smugglers are grateful to their people smugglers. I've met lots and lots of boat people in Australia. I've never heard one of them complain about their people smuggler. By the time Abbott became the leader of the coalition, it was a bit unrespectable to bag asylum seekers themselves. We had gradually figured out that these were terrified Hazaras fleeing the Taliban. These were terrified Iranians fleeing the theocratic madmen in Iran. People fleeing Saddam Hussein. I mean, how can you decide to bomb Iraq and say people who are escaping the bombing are terrible, bad people? It's kind of different. So the attack was an attack on the people smugglers, a much softer target. The drowning excuse began when the boat smashed to bits off the shore of Christmas Island. It was an appalling sight. No one could fail to be moved by seeing that awful slow-motion death of so many people. And so Stop the Boats was initially stop the drownings. The point of it was to stop the drownings. But it gradually morphed. And you'll notice that recently the coalition government have said, we stopped the boats. What that means is we stopped them from arriving. Well, all but one of them, but let's say they've stopped them. But we know they haven't stopped them setting out. We know they haven't stopped them setting out because we have intruded onto Indonesian territorial waters at least half a dozen times in order to force boats back. We've bought millions of dollars worth of fancy lifeboats in order to send people back. We don't know how many people have drowned because that's an on-water matter and we're not allowed to know. We have not stopped the boats in the sense that it originally meant. We haven't stopped the drowning so far as we are aware. We certainly haven't dissuaded people from chancing their arm in a way that I suspect most of us will chance our arm if we're unlucky enough to be in their shoes. Think about this. People fleeing, the boat people typically come from that corner to our northwest. Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and they come down through Malaysia and Indonesia. They haven't signed a convention. They offer no protection. People come down that way. They can get in because you can get a 1-month visa on entry, as you all know if you've travelled there. But after 1 month, you are genuinely illegal. After 1 month, you risk being arrested if you're found. After 1 month, you have to live in the shadows, or else you'll find yourself in a filthy Indonesian jail. So, you can go into the UNHCR office in Jakarta, of course. You can ask for refugee status, of course. Many people do it and they get a document from the UNHCR office in Jakarta saying, yes, you're a refugee. I mean, if you're a Hazara from Afghanistan, it's about a 99.9% likelihood that you are a refugee. That's kind of easy. So, then what do? Well, after the 1 month, even though you've got that piece of paper from the UNHCR, you cannot get a job, because if you get a job, you'll be found. If you're found, you'll be jailed. You can't send your kids to school, because if you send your kids to school, you'll be found, and if you're found, you'll be jailed, and they'll be jailed, and it's miserable. So what can you do? You can wait for a country to offer to resettle you. How long will that take? Well, on current figures, between 20 and 30 years. Or you can chance your arm and risk your life using a people smuggler on a boat. Is there anyone in this room who wouldn't do that? Anyone at all? What is it about this country that it's a measure of political success that you criticise and abuse the people who act exactly as we would act if we were in their shoes? It is at the very least a grotesque failure of our imagination. It's supported by grotesque dishonesty from our politicians who keep on telling us these people are illegals when they're not. The other catastrophic element of our current policy is this. It started off, as I say, as an attempt to stop people drowning. But what do? We punish the ones who don't drown. It's a rare inversion of logic that the people, the victims who survive the voyage are the ones who get punished. I don't know how anyone can explain that. What happens to them? They get brutalised from the time they set foot in Christmas Island until the time, if ever, that they leave Nauru or Manus Island. Let me give you an instance. Christmas Island. I have a number of statements from people, doctors, working on Christmas Island. When people arrive on Christmas Island, they've typically been at sea for 8 or 10 days. Most of them are people who've never seen the ocean before, let alone been on the ocean. They are traumatised by the experience. They've typically had not enough to eat or drink. They've typically had no opportunity to wash or change their clothes. They typically arrive weary, desperate, frightened, wearing clothes caked in their own excrement. They are not allowed the dignity of an opportunity to watch and change before they're interviewed by officers of the Immigration Department. In those degrading circumstances, it's then decided whether they'll be sent to Nauru or Manus, or whether they'll be held on Christmas Island for a time for further inquiries to be made. When they are processed, any medication they've got on them is taken. One person has a full-time job sitting in front of a rubbish bin popping pills out of blister packs for later destruction. If they have any medical documentation, it is confiscated. If they have any medical appliances like prosthetic limbs, spectacles, hearing aids and the like, those are confiscated and not returned. The net effect of this is to humiliate them and degrade them in every living moment of their existence after that. One of the doctors there told me of a woman. She had been on Christmas Island for a few weeks, and the prevailing view was that this woman was insane. No one could understand the problem. Her behaviour was right off the edge. So this doctor said she wanted to interview the woman to work out what was wrong. The interview was difficult because the woman didn't speak English and the doctor didn't speak, I think it was Iranian. So they had an interviewer, but the interviewer was not at the table with them. The interviewer was at the other end of the telephone speaking from Sydney. It took some time for the doctor to work out that this woman's problem was that she was incontinent of urine. She had had her original clothes taken from her and had been reissued with clothes but no underwear, and she couldn't leave her room without having urine running down her leg, and that was driving her mad. The doctor told immigration this woman needed incontinence pads. Their initial response was, "We don't do those." She insisted. They eventually agreed to provide 4 per day, which apparently is not enough. She has to queue up for more. That was the way we are treating people who've done nothing at all wrong apart from coming and asking for our help, asking for protection. This is what happens on Christmas Island. They then, if they're unlucky, they're sent to Nauru or to Manus Island. Manus Island, everyone knows what happened to Reza Verity on the 17th of February last year. Interesting that it's a year and 2 days since he was killed. No one has yet been taken before a court. It was months before anyone was charged. But 2 weeks after Reza Verity was killed, I received some sworn witness statements. One of them was an eyewitness account of Verity's death. He said, initially, you may recall, Scott Morrison dishonestly said Verity had escaped from detention and was killed by locals outside the detention centre. He had to recant. And the statement that I received said that Reza Verity was in the camp running and trying to get back into his room where he could escape the violence that was happening. He was approached by one of the guards who had a 2 metre long plank of timber with 2 long nails driven through it. The nails were sticking out at the far end. He brought 2 blows down on Reza Verity's head, lacerating his scalp terribly. Verity had blood all over his head and fell to the ground. 10 to 15 guards, including 2 Australians, rushed up to him and started kicking him in the stomach and in the head. He tried to protect himself. One of the guards, and this witness statement names these people, one of the guards then picked up a rock and brought it down savagely on Verity's head, killing him. And he said, "I knew he was dead because when they kicked him after that, he didn't flinch." Now, that statement had not been provided to the Papua New Guinea police by the time Robert Cornwall went over there on behalf of the Australian government to make a report on the incident. That was in June, so 4 months had gone past without those witness statements being provided to the PNG police. So far, as I say, despite what is clearly a cold-blooded killing, it's very hard to see what defence there is to that bit of murder. No one has faced a court. And of course it suits Australia very well for people to live in dread of the idea that they might end up on Manus Island, where they'll be tormented by the appalling conditions and face the risk of dying for lack of medical treatment, like Hamid Kahazai, or murdered, like Reza Verity.